To London now. Laura Jays has the latest details, and she's got Sky News regular and a very special guest with her.
I do, Pete. Thanks so much. The economics editor at The Australian, Adam Creighton. I see you more in here than I do in Sydney. Good to see you. This is such a huge story that is brewing here in London. It is the third election in just 4 years, but it is the most important vote really in a generation. The manifestos and the two alternatives on offer couldn't be more different, could they? As an economics editor, let's start with Labor. It's an extraordinary manifesto. What Labor's promising to do would really usher in a socialisation of this economy, wouldn't it?
Certainly, look, that's right. Look, I don't think since 1979 have we seen such an important election in this country. That's, of course, when Margaret Thatcher was elected, and the country changed its direction, I think, for a positive way. If Labor wins this Thursday, I think you'll see a return to the 1970s, actually, to that era of government before Thatcher. And, of course, that's when there was so much state ownership in the UK. It's when the UK actually had to seek a bailout from the IMF. So they were hardly glory days. Basically the signature policy, I think, of Labor is to renationalise vast swathes of the public sector. And look, this is something that no other Western country is really doing at the moment. I think it would be very, very difficult to do. They also propose huge increases in income tax, supposedly on the top 5%, but most impartial observers say that that's actually not possible because, of course, it's very easy to move these days, to change countries, and so the large tax burden would actually fall on ordinary British people. We're
talking about free broadband, a nationalisation of the healthcare system, a nationalisation of energy and water, 4-day working weeks, how they're going to pay for that, taxing the top 5% of income earners, a bigger tax on corporations. The question of, what would happen to these corporations? Well, they'll just leave with, with many others.
Indeed,
that really hasn't been answered by Jeremy Corbyn. Essentially, Adam, it's a spending of an extra £80 billion a year.
It is extraordinary, and indeed the Conservative Party actually puts the cost at £1.2 trillion actually over the next 10 years.
Can't even actually get my head around how much money that is.
The sad thing is, I think the election is just all about, it's mainly about feelings, both on the Brexit issue and also on the state of the economy. It's not so much about the numbers. I think, the mere fact that so many British people are going to vote for the Labor Party on Thursday, I think it gives a reminder that there's something seriously wrong in this country.
Yeah.
Because they are such extreme policies.
It's more about the state of the political class and
really
the disconnect with the people they're trying to represent, doesn't it?
It does. Look, I think the scars of the financial crisis are still very deep here, and I think people are very angry about that. I think one interesting stat is that median household income here is actually less now than it was 10 years ago, still. And it's something that's very hard for us to imagine in Australia, where, for a few years we've had some stagnant wage growth, but it's really nothing like what working people have experienced here, and I think that explains the anger towards the Conservative Party, and does explain some of the somewhat irrational support, I would say, for the Labor Party.
And people are sick of austerity. You can certainly feel that when you get outside of London, but the solution is quite an extreme one from Labor. But the Tories do have something to answer for. We have to remind ourselves that they have been in power here for almost 10 years, either in a minority or a majority sense.
No, certainly austerity. It's good that you mentioned that. I think that is certainly dead and buried in this country. So even if the Tories win on Thursday, there'll certainly be no more austerity. Indeed, the manifesto of the Tory party is basically now about spending more. So 50,000 more nurses, 50 million more hospital visits. It sounds like a Labor Party manifesto actually in Australia. And so the idea that there'll be a budget surplus here is just completely pie in the sky. The Conservatives have failed, actually, I think, in that regard. Just to look at public debt. So in this country, it's about 84% of GDP, which is about 4 times in Australia. So, we worry about our federal debt of about 18%, but here it's 84, and it's not going anywhere. So, and of course, it's going to be a lot more than 84 if the British Labor Party are victorious on Thursday.
Well, it's all about perspective, isn't it, Adam?
It is,
you and I get to go home. Look, if there is, depending on the result on Thursday, what will you be following? Following the money, of course. If Labor wins, what do you expect to happen to the British pound?
Yeah, well, look, it will certainly tank. Those exit polls are fairly accurate. So sometime after 10 p.m. British time on Thursday, we'll have a very good idea.
It is at 10 p.m. actually. And let me just quickly explain to our audience. Polling is notoriously wrong in this country, but exit polls
are accurate.
I know. That's the opposite of home in a general election.
So certainly finally will be sitting at their computers at that time, and there'll be massive movements, I would say, on financial markets either way. So certainly if Labor does win, the pound will fall a lot. It will rise a lot, of course, if the Tories win. I mean, longer term, it's a much more unclear outlook, of course. I mean, traders generally think that if Britain does leave the EU without a deal, then that's going to be a weaker pound, and of course that's kind of generally what the Tories want to do. So look, there's just so much uncertainty around. We really don't know, but certainly it'll be a wild night on financial markets on Thursday night.
Absolutely, and on that note, we will see you during that wild
Yes.
night, I'm sure. Adam Creighton, thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura.
Back to you, Pete.